The foggy dawn of March 12, 1845 broke cold and heavy over the Hawthorne plantation in Charleston, South Carolina. Overseer Elijah Kane made his way through the mist toward the slave cemetery to check on recent burials after a night of fierce winds. What he found stopped him dead in his tracks. The iron gates hung open, creaking slightly in the breeze. Inside, 6 fresh graves gaped empty, the earth scattered as if clawed from within. No bodies remained, but that was not the worst of it. Carved roughly into the wooden headboards were words that sent a chill straight through him. 6 lives for 6 fortunes. The debt is paid in shadows. At the base of one marker lay a weathered journal, its pages crammed with cryptic entries about forbidden deals and names of the South's richest planters. Entries that ended with a final line in faded ink. The harvest begins at midnight. God have mercy on our souls. What Elijah Kane uncovered that morning went far beyond grave robbery or simple theft. It pointed to a deadly bargain that had already claimed the lives of powerful men and threatened to unravel the very fabric of Charleston's elite society. Before we dive into the sinister truth behind this pact that destroyed some of the South's most influential families, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more forgotten tales from America's shadowy past. We thrive on your thoughts, so drop a comment below. Tell us where you are tuning in from and if your own family history holds any dark secrets that keep you up at night. Now, let us step back to 1837, when this nightmare first took root. The year 1845 saw the American South at a crossroads. Cotton reigned supreme, fueling fortunes and feeding the nation's growing industrial hunger. But beneath the surface, tensions simmered. The Panic of 1837 had left deep scars, with banks collapsing and land values plummeting. In South Carolina, the planter class clung to power through vast estates, political maneuvering, and an unyielding reliance on enslaved labor. Yet the system showed cracks. Debts mounted, crops failed under erratic weather, and whispers of reform from the North stirred unease among those who had built empires on human bondage. Charleston stood as the jewel of this world, its harbors bustling with ships laden with cotton bound for Europe. Elegant homes along the Battery showcased Palladian architecture and lush gardens, symbols of refined Southern wealth. But behind those wrought iron gates lurked desperation. Families who once hosted lavish balls now pawned heirlooms in secret to keep appearances intact. The Hawthorne family epitomized this fragile grandeur. Samuel Hawthorne had inherited a fortune from rice and cotton fields, expanded through savvy trades in the city's markets. His wife, Eliza, brought old Virginia lineage and ties to British merchants that had once provided easy credit. Their plantation, Willow Bend, stretched over 2,000 acres, with grand columns framing a veranda where society gathered. Enslaved families numbering in the hundreds tended the fields, maintained the house, and ensured the Hawthornes' life of ease. Yet by 1845, this facade hit a crumbling foundation. The 1837 crash had wiped out Samuel's investments, leaving him with debts exceeding $50,000. Creditors circled, and social whispers hinted at ruin. Similar troubles plagued 3 other prominent families. The Blackthorns of nearby Beaufort County ran indigo and Sea Island cotton operations, but falling prices had forced them to mortgage lands they could no longer afford. Jonathan Blackthorne, a stern patriarch, watched his holdings shrink as European buyers turned elsewhere. The Silvertons, based in Charleston's merchant district, dealt in shipping and had seen their fleet idle during the downturn. Marcus Silverton borrowed heavily to stay afloat, risking everything on the next harvest. And the Windermeres, with estates along the Ashley River, combined old money with new ambitions in politics. Theodore Windermere aimed for a Senate seat, but scandals and financial woes threatened to derail him. All 4 families shared a common thread: pride in their bloodlines, fear of downfall, and a willingness to grasp at any lifeline. Into this vortex of despair came a letter in July 1844, sealed with black wax and no return address. It arrived at Willow Bend first, addressed to Samuel Hawthorne in a script both elegant and unfamiliar. The sender called herself Madame Ebon, representing interests that could erase debts and restore fortunes. But the offer demanded more than money. It spoke of a sacred exchange, providing gifted workers who possessed skills beyond ordinary means. These individuals, she claimed, would transform plantations into models of efficiency and wealth. The cost? A vow of silence and participation in an arrangement that bound families across generations. Samuel dismissed it at first, tossing the letter into the fire. But as autumn brought harvest failures and more demands from lenders, the words lingered in his mind. He was not alone. Identical missives reached the Blackthorns, Silvertons, and Windermeres within days. Each family reacted with suspicion, yet curiosity grew as their situations worsened. Madame Ebon's promises seemed tailored to their plights. Immediate cash infusions, access to hidden markets, and protection from the economic storms ravaging the South. What they did not know was that Madame Ebon had orchestrated similar deals before, weaving a web that spanned continents and centuries. Her true motives hid in shadows, far removed from simple commerce. The first meeting occurred under cover of night on September 3, 1844. At an abandoned warehouse near Charleston's docks, Samuel and Eliza Hawthorne arrived by carriage, cloaked against recognition. They found the other families waiting, tension thick in the air. Madame Ebon emerged from the darkness, her face veiled in black lace, her voice carrying a faint accent that hinted at distant shores. Not quite African, not European, but something that set nerves on edge. With her stood a companion introduced as Elder Voss, a gaunt figure with eyes like polished stone, carrying a satchel of instruments that gleamed under lantern light. Madame Ebon laid out the terms with calm precision. Each family would receive 6 enslaved workers, selected for their unique talents. These gifts would boost production, reveal hidden efficiencies, and ensure prosperity. In return, the families pledged loyalty to the compact, signing documents that mixed legal language with ancient oaths. The workers came from special sources, she explained, trained in arts lost to time. But there was a catch. Each family must provide something in exchange. Not gold, but access to their households and a promise to nurture the gifts without question. Breaking the pact would invite ruin beyond financial loss. The Hawthorns hesitated, but Madame Ebon produced ledgers showing their exact debts, along with secrets that could shatter reputations. A hidden affair here, a forged deed there. She offered bank drafts for $10,000 each as a gesture of good faith. By dawn, all 4 families had signed, their thumbs pricked to seal the agreement in blood. As they left, Madame Ebon whispered words that echoed later in their dreams. The gifts you receive carry old blood. Honor them, and they will honor you. Betray them, and the shadows will claim what is due. The new workers arrived 2 weeks later, delivered under moonlight to each estate. They appeared ordinary at first, strong men and women, silent and efficient. But subtle differences emerged. They spoke little, yet seemed to understand commands before spoken. Crops under their care flourished unnaturally, yielding double the usual harvest. The Hawthorns marveled as fields once barren produced cotton of exceptional quality. The Blackthorns saw indigo dyes take on deeper hues, fetching premium prices. Silverton ships loaded faster, with crews reporting fewer accidents. Windermere political gatherings drew influential guests, as if drawn by an invisible pull. Yet prosperity came with unease. The workers moved in perfect sync, even across distances. One would hum a tune, and miles away, another would join seamlessly. Livestock began dying in odd ways, bodies arranged in circles with no signs of struggle. Enslaved communities whispered of night rituals, where the newcomers gathered under trees, chanting in tongues that stirred ancestral memories. Family members reported dreams of dark figures demanding tribute. By November, changes deepened. At Willow Bend, Samuel Hawthorne noted the workers displaying knowledge of forgotten lore. One man recited planting cycles from ancient texts never seen on the plantation. A woman wove patterns into cloth that seemed to shift in light, mesmerizing viewers. Eliza confided in her diary that the air felt heavier, as if watched by unseen eyes. Similar reports came from the other estates. Jonathan Blackthorne found his workers altering tools into shapes that defied logic, yet worked flawlessly. Marcus Silverton overheard conversations in languages his scholars could not identify. Theodore Windermere awoke to find symbols etched on his bedroom door, symbols that matched those in Madame Ebon's documents. Tragedy struck first at the Blackthorne estate in late December. Jonathan was found lifeless in his study, face twisted in fear, no marks on his body. The physician called it heart failure, but servants spoke of screams in the night. One of the gifted workers was seen nearby, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. When questioned, he replied softly. He saw the debt unpaid. Now it balances. Mrs. Blackthorne noticed her husband's journal pages torn out, entries about doubts over the pact gone. The pattern repeated. In January, Marcus Silverton vanished during a storm, his horse returning alone. Searchers found no trace, but at the docks, workers arranged crates in formations that mirrored ritual sites. Theodore Windermere suffered nightmares that left him weakened, confiding to allies that shadows moved in his halls. The families exchanged frantic letters, demanding answers from Madame Ebon. Her replies were terse. The transformation unfolds as intended. These gifts awaken old powers. Interference invites the harvest. Enter Dr. Harlan Voss, a Charleston physician unrelated to Madame Ebon's companion, drawn by rumors of strange ailments among the elite. Voss, a man of science with a bent for the occult, consulted on cases where family members exhibited unexplained symptoms. Sleeplessness, visions, physical marks that healed overnight. His investigations revealed patterns. Blood samples from affected households showed anomalies, cells that regenerated too quickly. He traced the workers' origins to shadowy ports in West Africa, where tales spoke of souls bound to serve eternal forces. Voss's journal, found after his mysterious death, detailed horrors. "These workers are vessels," he wrote, "infused with entities that feed on lineage and power. Blending voodoo with darker rites, they infiltrate to claim hosts." Historical records showed similar pacts in colonial times, always ending in vanished bloodlines. Voss warned the families, but threats followed. His end came swiftly. Body discovered with eyes wide, as if staring into abyss. Surviving enslaved witnesses provided key testimonies. One from Willow Bend described underground chambers beneath the house where the missing were held. Harvested, she said, for pacts that bound souls. Synchronized possessions, gripped gatherings, bodies moving as one under invisible command. Federal agents, alerted by whispers, probed but files vanished, officials silenced. Questions remain unanswered. Who truly was Madame Ebon, a mortal broker or ageless entity? Did her scheme puppet Charleston's elite, reshaping power into something inhuman? Whispers suggest replacements linger in bloodlines today, influencing from shadows. But the full extent of this darkness only emerges as we trace the ritual's climax, leaving you to wonder what became of those who dared the pact. As the winter of 1844 gave way to the damp spring of 1845, the families bound by Madame Ebon's pact started to feel the weight of their choice in ways they never expected. What began as a whisper of doubt grew into a storm of fear that tore at their minds and homes. The gifted workers, those silent figures who had brought such sudden wealth, now cast long shadows over everything. At Willow Bend, Samuel Hawthorne found himself waking in the dead of night, convinced he heard voices murmuring just beyond his bedroom door. He would light a candle and search the halls, only to find nothing. But the air felt thick, like it held on to secrets he wasn't meant to know. Eliza, his wife, started keeping a journal, her entries growing shorter and more frantic as the days passed. She wrote of dreams where the workers stood over her bed, their eyes reflecting light that wasn't there. These weren't just bad nights. They were the first cracks in a facade that had seemed unbreakable. The other families faced their own quiet torments. Jonathan Blackthorne's widow, Abigail, took to locking her doors after her husband's death. But locks did little against the unease that seeped in like fog. She noticed how the gifted workers watched her children play, their gazes to knowing for strangers. Marcus Silverton's disappearance left his family reeling, his wife Clara searching his study for clues, finding only empty drawers where important papers had been. Theodore Windermere, still clinging to his political dreams, began canceling meetings, claiming illness. In truth, he couldn't shake the sensation that his every move was anticipated, as if the workers in his fields knew his thoughts before he did. These men and women, once pillars of Charleston society, now lived in a haze of suspicion and dread. Their suffering wasn't loud or dramatic at first. It built slowly, like pressure in a sealed room, making every breath a little harder. By February 1845, the families could no longer ignore the signs. They started meeting in secret, away from their estates, in back rooms of Charleston's taverns or under the cover of church gatherings. Samuel Hawthorne was the first to voice what they all felt. He spoke of how the workers seemed to age not at all, their faces unchanged despite the harsh sun and labor. Abigail Blackthorne shared stories from her enslaved quarters, where people whispered of the newcomers avoiding crosses and holy water, as if those things burned them. Clara Silverton brought a small cloth sample, woven by one of her gifted workers, with patterns that shifted when you stared too long, almost like they were alive. Theodore Windermere admitted to finding small altars in his barns, made of bones and feathers, arranged in ways that matched no known religion. They compared notes, realizing the Pacts had woven them together in a web they couldn't escape. But who could they turn to? Admitting the deal meant admitting desperation, and in their world, weakness was fatal. It was during one of these meetings that they decided to dig deeper. They hired a private investigator, a former sheriff named Elias Grant, known for his discretion in handling delicate matters among the elite. Grant was a practical man, scarred from years in law enforcement with a limp from a duel gone wrong. He took their money and promised answers, but warned them that some truths were better left buried. His investigation started simple, tracing the workers' arrival through shipping manifests at the docks. What he found puzzled him. No records matched the dates Madame Ebon had given. Ships from West Africa had docked, but their cargo lists spoke of ordinary goods, not people. Grant pushed further, interviewing dock workers under the guise of routine checks. One old sailor, half blind from years at sea, muttered about a vessel that arrived in fog, unloading figures who moved like ghosts. He claimed they spoke in clicks and whispers, languages that made his skin crawl. Grant noted it all in his files, but dismissed much as superstition. Still, he felt a chill he couldn't shake. As Grant delved into Madame Ebon's background, the mystery thickened. He searched old immigration logs and found no trace of her name. Widening his net, he contacted associates in Europe, trading letters that took weeks to cross the ocean. Replies came fragmented, speaking of a woman by similar description who had appeared in French ports during the Revolution, offering deals to desperate nobles. One letter from a Paris archivist described her as a shadow broker, linked to vanishings that left families ruined. Grant compiled these into a dossier, pages filled with sketches and copied documents. He showed it to the families, but instead of clarity, it brought more questions. Was Madame Ebon the same person across decades? How could that be? The families pored over the files, their hands trembling as they turned pages. Samuel Hawthorne felt a knot in his stomach, realizing they had invited something timeless into their lives. Fear escalated when the tragedies multiplied. In early March, at the Windermere estate, Theodore's young son Henry fell ill with no clear cause. The boy raved about shadows in his room, claiming the gifted workers sang to him in his sleep. Doctors came and went, prescribing tonics that did nothing. Henry wasted away, his skin paling as if drained. Theodore watched helplessly, his political ambitions forgotten in the face of a father's anguish. He confronted one of the workers, demanding answers. But the man only smiled and said the boy hears the old call. That night, Henry vanished from his bed, the window unbroken, no footprints outside. Search parties combed the grounds, finding only a circle of stones in the woods with Henry's toy inside. Theodore broke then, weeping in his wife's arms, the weight of loss crushing him. The other families heard and felt the ripple. Their own children started acting strange, drawing symbols in the dirt that matched those in Grant's dossier. Psychological strain showed in cruel ways. Eliza Hawthorne began seeing things, glimpses of figures and mirrors that weren't there when she turned. She stopped eating, convinced the food was tainted by unseen hands. Samuel tried to comfort her, but his own mind frayed. He dreamed of his ancestors, chained and screaming, accusing him of selling their legacy. At the Blackthorn home, Abigail isolated herself, barring doors against her own household. She heard footsteps in empty rooms, felt breaths on her neck. Clara Silverton, searching for her husband, found his ring in a worker's possession, but when she accused him, he claimed it appeared in his hand like a gift. These moments built a terror that wasn't just fear of death, but of losing oneself, piece by piece. Human suffering here was raw, the kind that twists the soul. Families who once commanded respect now whispered prayers in the dark, begging for release from a bargain that had turned poisonous. Grant's investigation took a darker turn when he visited the enslaved communities on the estates. He spoke to them in hushed tones, away from overseers, promising anonymity. What they shared chilled him. A woman named Lila from Willow Bend described nightly gatherings where the gifted workers led rituals under the moon. They drew blood from willing participants, mixing it with earth to form pastes that healed wounds overnight. But those who refused grew weak, as if sapped. An elder on the Blackthorn land recalled stories from his African homeland of spirits that possessed bodies to walk the earth. He said these workers carried such spirits, feeding on the living to grow strong. Grant recorded these testimonies in his files, pages now thick with ink-smeared notes. One account stood out, from a man named Josiah on the Silverton docks. He saw the workers submerge in water for hours, emerging unchanged as if they didn't need air. These revelations suggested the gifted weren't human at all, but vessels for something ancient and hungry. As risks mounted, Grant faced threats. Anonymous notes appeared at his door, warning him to stop. His horse was found lame one morning with marks like bites on its flank. He pressed on, driven by a sense of duty, but the families grew paranoid. Samuel Hawthorne burned letters from Grant, fearing they were cursed. Yet new information emerged that heightened the horror. Grant uncovered a hidden ledger in Charleston's old courthouse, buried in forgotten property records. It detailed similar pacts from the 1700s, where colonial families traded for prosperity and lost everything. Entries spoke of replacements, where the gifted took on the faces of the vanished, continuing their lives as imposters. Grant realized the pattern. The tragedies weren't random. They were steps in a process, culling the weak to make way for the new. Tragedy struck harder in April. Abigail Blackthorne was found in her garden, throat slit, but no weapon nearby. Her body lay in a pose that mimicked ancient carvings Grant had sketched. The sheriff ruled it suicide, but Grant knew better. He examined the scene, finding symbols etched in the dirt, fresh and deliberate. Clara Windermere? No. Clara Silverton endured her own loss when her daughter wandered into the fields and returned changed, speaking in tongues. The girl claimed to see the future, predicting deaths that came true. Theodore Windermere, already broken by his son's disappearance, confronted Madame Ebon in a desperate letter. Her reply arrived swiftly, sealed in black. It read, "The harvest ripens. Resist, and it consumes all." He showed it to Grant, who added it to his growing case files, now a trunk of papers that felt heavier each day. The psychological toll deepened. Samuel Hawthorne isolated himself in his study, poring over family Bibles for protection. He felt eyes on him, always, even alone. Eliza's suffering peaked when she clawed at her arms, trying to remove what she called shadows under her skin. Their marriage, once strong, fractured under the strain. Servants fled the estates, spreading rumors in Charleston that fueled more fear. Grant's historical probe revealed ties to voodoo practices smuggled from Haiti, blended with older rites from forgotten tribes. He found a map in an old book, marking sites where similar rituals had occurred, all leading to underground chambers beneath the plantations. Daring a visit to Willow Bend's cellars, he discovered a hidden door leading to rooms lined with jars of dark liquid. Inside one, he found a finger bone, engraved with names from the Pact. Escalation came swift. Grant was attacked one night, dragged into an alley by figures in cloaks. He fought free, but bore scars that never healed right. The families received visions, shared dreams of a great awakening where the gifted shed their skins to reveal true forms. New terror emerged from enslaved testimonies. One woman confessed to seeing a worker split open a cow, drinking its essence while the animal still breathed. Another spoke of children born in secret, with eyes like the gifted, hidden away. Grant's files now included drawings of these horrors, his hand shaking as he sketched. Questions piled up, unanswered and gnawing. What fed these entities? Why target the South's elite? Were the gifted scouts for a larger invasion or remnants of lost empires? Federal whispers reached Grant, agents from Washington investigating similar cases up north. But they vanished too, their reports sealed. The risk peaked when Samuel found his own name carved into a tree, dated for death. Human agony showed in every tear, every sleepless night. Families clung to faith, but even churches offered no sanctuary, as gifted workers lingered outside, watching. Yet amid this, Grant uncovered a ritual date tied to the summer solstice. It promised completion, where the pacts would seal forever. The families prepared, but doubt lingered. Could they break free, or were they doomed to become the very shadows they feared? The truth waited in those underground chambers, beckoning them deeper into the abyss. As the shadows of spring lengthened into the humid grip of summer 1845, the families teetered on the edge of something irreversible. Elias Grant's warnings echoed in their minds, his files a grim testament to the Pact's true nature. Samuel Hawthorne gathered the remaining heads of household at a neutral spot, an old chapel outside Charleston, its walls cracked from years of neglect. They spread out the documents under flickering candlelight, piecing together the ritual's approach. The solstice loomed, a date circled in red on Grant's map, promising a harvest that would claim more than crops. Fear had woven itself into their daily lives, a quiet companion that made every glance over the shoulder feel justified. Children hid under beds, servants whispered prayers, and the gifted workers moved with an ease that now seemed predatory. No one slept soundly anymore. Dreams blurred into waking hours, filled with visions of endless fields where faces from the past begged for release. Grant pushed his investigation to its limits, risking everything for clarity. He infiltrated one of the underground chambers beneath the Blackthorn estate, slipping in during a moonless night. What he found there broke something inside him. Jars lined the walls, filled with a viscous fluid that pulsed faintly, as if alive. In the center lay restraints bolted to the floor, stained with what looked like old blood. Scratched into the stone were names, not just of the vanished like Henry Windermere, but of others from decades past. Grant copied them frantically, his lantern casting jittery shadows. One name stood out, a colonial governor from the 1700s, linked to a similar disappearance. He realized then that this wasn't a new scheme. It stretched back through time, a cycle of infiltration that fed on power and desperation. The entities, whatever they were, didn't just possess bodies. They rewrote histories, ensuring their hold endured across generations. Back in Charleston, the families felt the noose tighten. Clara Silverton received a package at her door, unmarked and heavy. Inside was her husband's journal, pages she thought lost, now annotated in a hand that wasn't his. Entries detailed doubts about the pact, but the additions mocked them. Debts paid in full, one read, but souls accrue interest. She burned it, but the words lingered, eating at her resolve. Theodore Windermere, hollowed by his son's loss, started hearing Henry's voice in the wind, calling him to the fields. He followed once, finding a gathering of the gifted under ancient oaks. They formed a circle, chanting softly, their bodies swaying in unison. When he approached, they turned as one, eyes reflecting starlight in unnatural ways. He fled, but the image haunted him, a reminder that his boy might not be gone, just transformed into something unrecognizable. Heartbreak like that doesn't fade. It festers, turning love into a weapon against the self. Samuel and Eliza Hawthorne endured their own private hell. Eliza's visions worsened, convincing her that shadows lived in her veins. She scratched at her skin until it bled, whispering that the entities wanted in. Samuel tried doctors, even a priest, but nothing helped. One night, he caught a gifted worker watching her sleep, hand extended as if drawing something from the air. When confronted, the worker said only, "She carries the old blood. It calls to us." Samuel locked the house after that, but locks meant little against what seeped through cracks. Their suffering peaked in small moments, like when Eliza looked at him and asked if he was still himself. Doubt like that erodes a marriage, leaving only echoes of what was. Grant's final breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A federal agent, anonymous and cloaked, met him in a back alley. The man carried sealed documents from Washington, hinting at a broader conspiracy. Similar pacts had surfaced in New Orleans and Boston, always targeting the elite during times of crisis. The agents spoke of replacements where the gifted assumed lives of the fallen, steering society from within. But why the South? The paper suggested a design to fracture the nation, using economic ties to spread influence. Slavery provided cover, a system already built on control and silence. Grant added these to his trunk, now bulging with evidence. Yet the agent warned him, "Pursuit invites the harvest. Some things watch back." Grant nodded, but pressed on, driven by a sense that stopping now meant surrender. As the solstice neared, terror built to a crescendo. Strange occurrences plagued the estates. Crops withered in patterns that formed symbols from Grant's sketches. Animals howled at nothing, and the air grew heavy with a scent like decay. The families attempted a desperate counter-ritual, guided by an enslaved elder versed in old ways. They gathered salt and iron, items said to repel spirits, and circled their homes. But the gifted infiltrated, disrupting with whispers that sowed discord. Fights broke out among the families, accusations flying. Theodore blamed Samuel for starting the pact. Clara wept over lost trust. In the chaos, more vanished. A blackthorn servant, then Clara's maid. Each disappearance left marks, small punctures like bites, healed but scarred. The night of the solstice arrived under a blood moon, casting everything in eerie red. Grant had urged evacuation, but pride kept them rooted. At Willow Bend, Samuel barricaded his family in the main house, pistols loaded. Outside, the gifted assembled, silent and still. Then the chanting began, low and resonant, vibrating through walls. Eliza screamed, clutching her head as visions overwhelmed her. Samuel fired shots into the dark, but they hit nothing. Doors rattled, windows fogged with breath from unseen sources. In the other estates, similar scenes unfolded. Theodore faced his son's apparition in the hall, a twisted version that beckoned him closer. Clara heard Marcus calling from the docks, luring her to the water's edge. By dawn, silence fell. Grant arrived at Willow Bend first, finding the house empty. Furniture overturned, symbols burned into floors. No blood, no bodies, just absence. The gifted were gone too, vanished like mist. He searched the underground chambers, discovering only empty jars and a single note. The cycle renews. Debts pass to heirs. Similar emptiness greeted authorities at the other properties. Official reports cited runaway debts and flight, but Grant knew better. The families hadn't fled. They had been harvested, their essences fed to whatever lurked within the gifted. Heartbreaking in its finality, yet terrifying because it felt incomplete. Replacements would emerge, wearing familiar faces, continuing lives as if nothing changed. Grant's files disappeared soon after, seized by federal hands. He himself vanished weeks later, his home left tidy, as if he stepped out for a walk. Whispers in Charleston spoke of new owners taking the estates, prosperous and enigmatic. Society moved on, but cracks remained. Questions lingered, unanswered and insistent. What became of the children, like Henry? Did they become vessels or something worse? And Madame Ebon, was she a conduit for forces older than nations? Drawing from Africa's shadowed past to reshape America's future, the story fades into history, but echoes persist. In modern times, look at certain bloodlines among the elite, those who rise from crises unscathed. Families in finance or politics, weathering scandals with unnatural grace. Patterns emerge, if you dig, disappearances tied to economic dips, followed by sudden fortunes. Think of corporate empires built on silent deals, or leaders whose eyes hold depths that unsettle. Is it coincidence or the Pact evolving? Entities adapting to boardrooms and ballots, harvesting in subtler ways. No complete end here, just a thread pulling through time, inviting you to wonder if the shadows still watch. What do you make of this tale? Does it stir memories of odd family stories or make you question today's power structures? Hit like if it gave you chills. Comment your thoughts below and subscribe for more dives into America's hidden horrors. We uncover the past so it doesn't repeat, or does it? Stay tuned for the next chapter.